Well, yeah, Laura told me that this is gonna be a revolving door anyway, that people are gonna be in and out, so we'll just run, we'll run with it, we'll just play it by ear. Because I look at it this way, the sooner we get through it, the sooner we're out of here, you know? I can't have this guy working till 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I'm all guilty, he's working 12 hours a day back there.
That young boy does not work that
Comes in and
much.
he's exhausted, you know,
He's used to it.
looks like he's seen
That's
25
just 'cause
miles
he
of,
stays up all night.
oh, he didn't tell me that
Yeah,
part.
no.
Yeah,
We're not gonna be here at 8.
yeah. Out on the town and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well,
Don't feel sorry for him.
isn't that great when you're young, you can pull
Yeah.
that off? God, I can still remember those days, as a matter of fact, you know, as I fall asleep at 9 o'clock at night. Yeah. So, anyway, okay, summer squash, we'll start with summer squash, and then this is, of the two types, this is by far the most problematic, just because it's the weakest, and I don't know, most people are just dealing with the yellow, straight and crook necks. I don't know if you even bring the crook necks in, do you? You do some crook neck squash? Do you do anything, they call these yellow squash, but essentially what they are is yellow zucchinis. I just saw some of those last week, and they seem like
We
they're
call it gold bar.
gold bar, okay, I've heard that name too. Do you do any of the ones in the middle here, the patty pan type squash? Handle any of these?
Nope.
I don't even think I've ever even eaten those, you know, I've seen them a lot, but I don't think I've eaten them, so I don't really know. Same thing with the one up the upper left there. Very weak skin squash. Here again, this was, standard was an older standard, and it was updated here last September, and the only thing they changed was now you can include both yellow squash and zucchini squash in the same package as long as the containers are marked. That's the only change that was to the standard. Other than that, this thing has been around forever. These tolerances are based on count, and I don't know, are you guys, is this the normal, the standard box that you guys are bringing this stuff in, or is it normally bigger
No,
crates for the
it's,
local?
Kind of like the size of that Roma box. but
Okay.
It's deep. And we got fancy and medium in both flavors.
Tell me what that means.
To us, it means the fancy is the smaller, skinnier, where the medium is the bigger, bulkier, more of the crooked neck. You might get that in the medium.
So this is a fancy.
That's a fancy.
This is a medium.
That's a medium.
Medium.
It's
Medium.
very
I wouldn't want to get
large.
hit in the head with that one either, so. Now, when you, just by looking at that, okay, I know what a fancy is, I know, but what's the limits, are there no limits? Is it an eyeball type evaluation?
Like an eyeball.
Eyeball.
We do with peppers.
Yeah, you're not measuring any diameters, lengths, anything like that.
And sometimes, depending upon the shipper, they can come pretty close, so sometimes we can, oh wait, that fancy kind of looks like a medium, or vice versa, it just depends on the shipper.
And especially when you're dealing with the local stuff, because that's where it seems like you get your oddball mixtures, those two end up in the same box, or the same container, and at that point, what do you, just take your pictures and send them to your buyer and say, hey, we got a problem here, which one is this? Is this a medium or is this a fancy? Okay, all right. Very easy defects. Again, I wish they were all this way. 10 total, that includes 5 serious, that includes 1 decay. PAC, like always, it bumps it up some. And, we want to look at the basic requirements. This is kind of like, as we said, they can mix them up. We want to make sure no decay. That's really the only free-from defect. What we're really looking for here more than anything, it seems like the zucchinis will have a bigger problem with like indentations, bruising, and decay. Where the yellow squash, you're going to see several defects thrown up here, and the first question that usually comes to mind is, wait a minute, how do I differentiate between, surface discoloration, sunken discolored area, scuffing, oxidation following scuffing? They all look the same. It's best, it really is, it's all going to get thrown into the same category, so it's however you want to describe it, really. There is no sizing requirements outside of what you guys set as your sizing requirements and your limits. And if you're not really measuring them, then I guess you're not really calculating any defects, okay? When we're looking at shape, I mean, you want the things to be as straight as possible. Sometimes you'll see these things and they'll almost form like it'll almost get like a spiral in them. That would be something that would be considered misshapen. It's a quality type defect. As far as when you're dealing with crook necks, now did these come out of the same,
Yeah.
they came out of the same box?
No, different. Are they different? Is that the lighter one and the darker one?
Well, no, here's,
Yeah, no, the other two came out the same.
okay, so these came out of the same box, and I would definitely consider these straight necks. This, I don't know that I would consider a straight neck, that's like a different variety. You know, usually they don't grow these in the same field. They're, you know, you got straight neck varieties, you got crook neck varieties. I don't know, I think if they come in and they look decent, I couldn't care less about the shape, you know, it's, you got so many other problems with these things that the shape of it really isn't gonna be the big issue. This is starting to be the big issue.
We see a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's just because, you know, a lot of this has to do with transit, how far it comes, because they'll sit in the box and they get jangled around, and especially the pallets on the back end, they get dribbled across the country.
And we have, most of our boxes, most of them are, you know, actually have the cover and they're, you know, folded, so when you're folding those wax boxes, we end up doing, when we open it and then we close it back up, we end up,
Hey,
you
guys.
know, making a cut or a scar from that wax box because it's a little tougher to fold,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you know, and I don't know if they still do this, but I know they used to.
learn something.
Some companies do this, that they'll staple the boxes. And it never fails, when they staple the top of the box closed, they do this.
yeah, we don't have that.
How about, do you get any of it from local in wooden crates?
No.
Nothing in wooden crates, so that is a plus as well, because that does a lot of this, you know, scuffs this thing up. You know, the problem here, there's really nothing wrong as far with that zucchini, as far as eating it. The problem is that, you know, any break in the skin like that is gonna oxidize. And so you get from this nice light green color of the exposed flesh of the zucchini, within 24, 48 hours, now you got tan flesh. And nobody wants it then at that point. They think it's defective, you know. You know, you're gonna see as we go on here, most of these defects are judgment calls. It's materially, seriously detracting, you know, whether you're going to score it as not, as a defect. Scarring, I mean, I think you see it more on the yellow, but here, I mean, you've got a good example of it right here, that this is pretty scarred up. You don't see a whole lot of it on the zucchinis. Here's one that looks like it's got the cut in it as well. So you pick good you know, you're gonna only pick 3 or 4 of them. You pick the choice ones, you know. Kind of messed up. So you don't see a whole lot of scars. And you know, as we talked about scars, how dark are they? How rough are they? And the rougher, the darker, the less you'll allow. As the chart illustrates. Again, I wouldn't worry about measuring them. I would just say if they're ugly, score them as damage. If they're really ugly, score them as serious damage, and get through it real fast. The insects and the worms. I don't know that we talked much about this yesterday, is, you know, how do you treat insects or bugs or anything like that? And it really depends on whether they're alive or they're dead. If they're alive, it's a condition defect. If they're dead, it's a quality defect. Now, I don't know, for 40 years, this hasn't made any sense to me, because remember those commodities we looked at yesterday where you've got different tolerances for quality and condition? And in every single instance, the tolerance for quality is lower than the tolerance for condition. Now think about how USDA handles bugs. If they're alive, it's conditioned, so I'm going to allow more. If they're dead, I'm going to allow less. Last I checked, a dead insect eats no more. It's done, you know. So I don't understand the rationale. Never have understood it. Doesn't make much sense. There's a big problem with this differentiation too. Is what happens? What do insects do when they get cold?
Burrow.
That or they just go dormant. They go to sleep, you know. And so you know, it comes off a refrigerated trailer, you're gonna think, you see bugs, they should all be asleep for the most part. You know, so you may have to give them a little mouth to mouth or something, or breathe on them, or put a little heat on them in order, you know, to see if they're moving or not, which way you're gonna score it in these commodities that separate the percentages or tolerances for quality and condition. If you have any wormholes that are unhealed, you know, that's gonna be scored as damage, and then you're looking at how many holes do you have and how deep they go. You know, I don't know about you, but I don't want any wormholes in my fruit or vegetables, and especially any live worms. And I don't think you want any in the warehouse either. You know, so this is something that it'd probably be best if you just treated it as a free-from defect and been done with it. You know, because they can get in and they can do a significant amount of damage. This is a real soft product, and they do burrow in and they pretty much go to town. We talked about bruising, and you look at areas of the bruise, and then you look at depth of the bruise, and usually you will get some kind of discoloration down in the into the meat of the squash itself. And you see, you don't allow nearly as much depth as you allow surface area of the bruise. So make sure you cut it. These are all based on a 6-inch long squash. So your mediums are going to be much longer than that. I mean, you're probably looking at probably somewhere between what, 12 inches, maybe 10 to 12 for your mediums. It's a big squash, so you're going to have to allow probably twice as much area for bruising. And here comes the biggest problem with soft squash, is all of the scuffing and discoloration. These things get scuffed as they're harvested, and there's no way around it. We did one of the companies I was working with, we did a field trip to a farm up in Michigan a couple years ago. And the guy did, on one side of the road he did yellow squash, the other side of the road he did zucchinis. So I asked him, I said, you know, this is just really problematic. Every company we work with has the same complaint. This stuff has no legs on it, they have it a day or two and it turns brown. You know, I said, is it how, you know, why? Why are you guys, is it how you're handling it? Is it going to be packed differently? And he says, it's, you know, it's really how it's harvested in the plant that it comes off of. He says, go see for yourself. So if you go and you look at a yellow squash plant, the stems of the plant actually have prickers and thorns on it. And even though this stuff is hand-picked, when you start getting in anything larger than probably that, and I don't know how you even avoid that, whether, you know, these guys are hand harvesting and they're picking it, they're dragging these across those thorns. I mean, I reached in there to pick one, and it was a smaller squash, and it got me, you know, and so I'm thinking, wow. And I said, so why doesn't it do that to the zucchini? I know it's a darker colored product, and it won't show the scuffing or the discoloration as much as the yellow will, but why doesn't it? He says, well, walk across the road and ask yourself. You know, go answer your own question. Zucchini doesn't have thorns on the stems. So they can harvest and pick them. If you see that mechanical damage that we looked at a couple slides ago on the zucchinis, that's just from rough handling at the packing house or during transit. The yellow squash doesn't have a chance. It's going to get scratched every time they harvest it, and it doesn't matter. So again, this goes back to where you said you had a problem the other day when the yellow squash came in, it was too warm. Is that problematic? Well, it was coming from right up the road. I'll take that because it probably has another day or two left before it oxidizes and turns brown, as opposed to the stuff you're bringing in from, I'm going to say where, Mexico or Florida or someplace like that. Yeah. And I bet you that's probably one of your biggest complaints with yellow squash, isn't it?
The scuffing and.
Yeah, the scuffing
Yeah.
and the discoloration.
And we will send it because we know that that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with the scuffing, but we have customers that will reject it just for the scuffing.
Yeah, because they want something that looks perfect. You know, and the thing is, I mean, and I get it, because the skin on a zucchini or yellow squash is so thin. I mean, you can use the whole thing. You cut the end off, you cut the, you know, the stem off, you just dice it up and you're in business. You cook it. You don't have to peel it. If you take like a carrot peeler or a potato peeler to the skin of one of those, you can get rid of the scuffing and you're in business. You don't know that it's scuffed. The only time then it becomes problematic with the yellow squash is you'll see here in a moment, when you get a little age on this stuff, now these dark marks, these scuff marks start to sink. And then you get these sunken discolored areas, and that's what usually discolors the flesh that's inside the, the edible portion of the squash itself. Right? I don't think there's any way to get around this. And so, I wish I had a better answer for you there, but this is something that everybody complains about. And I go in my own grocery, it doesn't matter what store I go to, Northwest Ohio, if you don't grow this in your backyard, or you know somebody that has a garden, you're gonna get scuffed up product. That's the only thing that's ever available. It's not very good looking. Yeah, and this is from the standard where, they says, well, if you've got scuffing and it hasn't discolored, you're allowed 10% of the surface, but if it discolors, you allow half that amount. And I'm thinking, well, great, tell me when it's not discolored, because every time I see it, it's discolored already. So you don't allow very much of it. These would all, even though these are pretty good looking yellow squash, outside of these, I can't even say that. That one would probably, you're probably pushing 5% of the surface right there. This is, that's about as best as they get, right, that I've seen in this box. These are starting to look a little weak. What do you think?
Well, at the end of our local season, we have more problems with our local grown than we do anything coming from Mexico or southern US.
Why do you think that is?
It'll come in, Ben will receive it, looks pretty, we ship it out, and all of a sudden we're getting calls from, our customers saying, this crap is blowing up. And it tends to happen significantly, much more at the end of the local grown season, where we see.
Is it more with decay, or is it with just discoloration?
Decay.
Decay.
It's the last crop, that's why.
It's what, one more time?
They're picking the last thing, they're trying to send us as much as they can.
It's the end.
Trying to make this the end of the season. They
Yeah, I
send
think
everything they can.
at end of season, I don't care even if you're doing local, if it's end of season, again, we kind of talked about this yesterday, they throw anything that looks like that commodity into the box, and then it's older product, it's last pickings, and it's still warm out, and they're shipping it warm, and you put all those things into the mix, and it has no legs, It's how fast you can get it in and how fast you can get it out, and they can get it to market. Yeah, so I take it, this is the end of what you're bringing in right now, the local stuff?
God, I hope so. I really do.
We're
I've
praying
been
for
preaching
frost.
about it for the last month to cut it off.
Yeah,
And we'll have it, speak of local grown, this is our local grown guy.
Hey, don't tell
Through
me.
October. And it's what we usually say every year.
and so it's sooner or later here in the next month or so, is it Florida or Mexico you guys are gonna source from?
Where's that fresh start coming from? Is
It's
that
Georgia.
Georgia?
Georgia?
They've had all that freaking rain down there too, so.
And it's gonna get worse. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
remember I said yesterday that one thing, in addition to knowing all this nonsense, inspectors really ought to watch weather patterns. Because if you get a drought or too much heat or too much rain or too much cold in any one of your growing areas, you're gonna see some of the product. And what are they calling for this weekend? They got another hurricane that's gonna hit South Georgia. And they're gonna get soaked, they're gonna get hammered with probably 15, 20 inches of rain. So you might not have any product coming out of Georgia, who knows? How's that affected some of your Florida, the last storm?
We're not doing much out of Florida right now. I know we put some squash into Ivy over the weekend and they flagged it out of Georgia. Quality issues.
Yeah, because that storm, that came right up through there and just drenched
I've
them.
been on a call with them right now explaining all this weather situations, You wanna beat on the Midwest, well, you know what? They're having other issues
Sure.
down there, so it just travels across. Everybody in here knows Mother Nature dictates everything.
Well, and this is, I've seen this with other commodities though, because at some point, the shipper or the grower is gonna call you and say, hey, look, you know, everybody's upset, everybody's moaning and groaning, you wanna call for federal inspections, and everybody's up in the air, you want all this protection. Look, this is what we've got. And I know that the great example of this is the strawberry growers out in California. They're all growing strawberries in the same area, you know, and so when they get too much drought, too much rain, which they've done, pick one, they've had one or the other in California now for the last 3 years. Okay, so they'll just call the, you know, the receiver and say, hey, look, we just had a lot of rain. You're gonna have 20 to 25% soft, mushy bruising, you know, until we can work our way out of it. And you can buy from us, you can buy from Driscoll, you can buy from one of our competitors, but we're all growing in the same area and we all had the same amount of rain, you know, so you're not gonna do yourself any better. So here's your options. You can either live with this until we work our way out of it, or we just won't ship you any product and you can do without for a while until we work ourselves out of it. But there's no getting around it. If you want the product, you're gonna have to deal with the defects that are gonna come with it, because that's what Mother Nature gave us. And this is exactly what's gonna happen now, probably for the next month or so out of Florida and Georgia, because they've had so much rain and they're gonna get more.
It's time to go to Nogales really quick. I mean, they've got squash coming up out of Mexico right now, and you know that's where the premium's gonna be.
Yeah, and I would imagine, yeah, and the key there is the premiums. It's because you can't source it out of out of the other location, the other's gonna know that, and there goes the price. You know, it's gonna go sky high.
That if you don't have the headaches, it's worth it, you know?
Yeah, well, it really is, because then you don't have to play, because you guys do a lot, you play the game the way it should be played, you know? Well, okay, I'll take it, but make it worth my while to take it and make it worth my while to work it, you know, or give me protection on it. Where most of your chains, if they're buying direct, they can't do that, because they haven't set up any type of rework area, and they don't want to mess around with protection. It either meets their spec or it doesn't meet their spec, and their spec's usually tighter than what the USDA is. Like Kroger's and Aldi, pick one, pick a chain. They're all the same. They've all set the bar a little bit higher than these standards, you know. So you meet them or you don't. Yeah, this is, when you start seeing these big blotchy, wet, water-soaked areas, this again where you gotta slow down a little bit and start kind of poking around with your thumb or the blade of your knife or whatever. These tend to get real soft and real mushy real fast. You know, then you're not worried about discoloration any longer. You're worried about rot, you know. And these get real fuzzy real fast too. The two on the right, I would definitely poke around on. Especially the one on the far right. Look how water soaked every one of those discolored areas is. Yeah, and that's almost like a progression right there. And you'd see that, you know, the one on the far left progress to the one on the far right. You guys have been doing this a long time. What do you think? 2 days?
1 day.
1 day sometimes? Yeah, yeah. And I think there's a good indicator of, or one of the causes would be how much rain, how much water was that exposed to out in the field. You know, there would be your 1 day. You get it in 1 day, and it's marginal. And the left two, on the left side, the two on the left are marginal at best when you receive them.
And that's where the growers, you know, they're packing and stuff. They're not seeing it that day of packing and stuff. And you know, we receive it a day or two later. We're seeing minimal. You go look the next day, it's progressed so much, and we see that a lot with zucchini or yellow if it's not cooled fast enough too.
Let's talk about those growers for a minute, because and we got plenty of time today, I think. But we did a class out in California here about 3 weeks ago for a big shipper, and you would think most big California shippers really have their act together as far as at least looking at the product for quality and understanding what they're packing, knowing what they're packing. And I'll even mention the companies, Grimway Farms. You know, Bunny, I don't know if you get much stuff from Grimway. Bunny Love brand, and they're a big vegetable shipper out in Bakersfield, in that area. And so, what they told me, they have 2 or 3 people that go out, and they will go out in the field and inspect the product and see, you know, they'll bust open a few, cut open a few, not a lot. They're not taking a sample like we're taking it and calculating the results, and they will let the crew know, okay, this field is got the quality that we can go, we can pack with it. And they're packing everything, it's field packs. Okay, and so I said, well, at least you guys are looking at the field. He said, and the comment was, yeah, but they don't always listen to us. So that's telling me, if they find the problem, guess what? They're packing it anyway. All right, so, so much for this, illusion of quality control. Then the stuff comes in from the field. Well, let's not even go, let's not so fast. So they'll go out on perhaps on a, let's say a Thursday, because he said they don't always get into the field the same day we look at it. I said, oh, well, how long does it usually take them to harvest? He says, up to 4 days. And so I'm in there on a, to start this class on a Monday morning, and I'm saying, okay, so let's say you went out last Friday and you looked at this product and you cut some open, it was lettuce, and you open it up and it looked great. And then you guys, on Sunday that week, they had a monsoon, they had a deluge. Several inches of rain, lots of wind. I think they said they even had tornadoes, which I didn't know they had in California, okay? I said, so they had all this bad weather, and then they got into the field. Monday morning hit, and Monday and Tuesday it was 106 degrees. So we have a deluge of rain, 106 degrees, it bakes. They looked at it on Thursday, and now they come in and harvest it on Tuesday. I said, did you go back in and look at it again? I said, because that's not even the same product anymore. No, they just harvested it. I said, well, that's great. So then I look at their QA guy. I said, so this stuff comes in on pallets, so how many are you looking at? What's your sampling procedure here, and how many are you breaking open? Well, he says, well, we open up a few boxes and we don't see anything obvious, that's it. I said, so you're not cutting any product open? You're not busting any heads open to see that there's a problem? No, they don't want us to break any heads open because it upsets the carton. I said, how about taking one carton out? I don't even care if the carton's $100 a pop. Take one carton out, and I'm gonna look at 2 heads, I'm gonna bust 2 heads. I'm gonna use this as my fill carton, and I can still take 10 more samples where I can look at 2 or 3 heads, and I'll replace them with the ones that are already wrapped. By the end of my inspection, I've expended 1 carton of lettuce, $100 at most. And they said, no, they won't let us do that. I said, okay. So then we started we had 4 one-day classes. And every class that we started opening up lettuce, we opened up every head in the box, and we went somewhere between 40 and 90% internal tipper. Loaded. And the real industrial stuff, the real dark brown to black stuff that you couldn't see externally. And their eyes got real big, and I said, well, I take it you shipped a little bit of this, huh? Well, several thousand boxes of it. I said, well, you should have fun the next few days then, because you're going to get complaints left and right. And how and why is that going to happen? Because you didn't take the time to look at it a little closer, and at the cost of maybe $75 or $100 for 1 box per load. And what were they going to say? But that's kind of how that quality and control goes, I've seen at Shipping Point. It's kind of blown me away, because most of my experience has always been like you guys. It's at the end. It's at the market end of it. So we see a lot of condition type defects that they don't see. They see more of the quality defects, but they're not checking for any of the condition defects that they're putting into the box. They don't even know they're putting into the box. They don't even know they're shipping it because they're not looking for it. And then you get it, and then you guys, I'm going to assume you 2 are buyers, correct? Yeah. Receivers, okay. Are you the buyer?
I'm a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything? Okay, well, as buyers go, you guys call out there, and then they ask you guys, well, what on earth? What do you mean we have a problem? Well, sometimes what I've learned here recently is they probably don't realize they have a problem, because you gotta look for it to find it. And if you're not looking for it, yeah, you get to tell them, and then at about the same time, that's when you guys ask for your protection, or you want a few bucks off a box, and then they got to go explain that to their grower. So the quality system with some of these people that are shipping it's not that great. There's a lot of room for improvement, and if they would do a better job on that end, you guys wouldn't have the hassles you have now. They do a better job. They would find it, it wouldn't get on the market. So, all right. Here's something that you'll see, you see it more in cucumbers, but you can also see it in zucchini. And this is a virus that affects the plant, works itself down, and what you'll see is, I don't know so much about these oddball shaped ones, it's this stuff right here, where it kind of, the skin isn't this solid green, it's real blotchy looking, like it's speckled. It's mosaic virus. Cucumbers get it quite often, okay? It's superficial, it won't hurt you, you can peel it, you'd never know that you had any problem, but they say because it doesn't have this natural green color, solid green color, that people don't want it. I don't know, I think they should sell it at a premium myself, because I think it's cool looking, but it is a defect, it's a quality type defect.
There's our imperfect produce.
Yeah, so you have these in one box, and the one on the top would definitely be, according to the USDA, this would definitely be a defect. This is the way you want it, and even that one's a little speckled. So you could probably score 2 out of the 3. I don't know, as long as they weren't rotting or bruised up, I think I would go with them. I let them go. How would you guys handle that if you saw that difference in a
We
box?
get a lot, if you go back to the screen before, the bottom zucchini there, the bigger one.
Yes,
we
on the
get-
left.
We get that.
There's one in the box, I think.
In this box there?
Should be a speckled one like that, I thought.
Yeah, we get some
Well,
speckled stuff that.
it depends where you're at. You got different varieties from different farms and different growers. Especially like Vernon County where you got 20 different Mennonite growers.
Yeah.
They're not all doing the 100%.
I don't know, I don't see it.
I think it's-
Yeah, I guess. This one's got a, is this the one you're saying is a little spottier?
Yeah. Oh, that's same glass.
They do look different, don't they?
Is that all in the same box?
I let them
No,
go.
he pulled like from different boxes.
Those two might be from the same box.
Are these,
I think so.
I would, I don't think that's mosaic. I don't think that's as splotchy as
Yeah, and we.
either one of those.
No, and it's like that bottom left picture, we get it where it's a little bit lighter in color.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Well, and again, there's a lot of different varieties of everything we look at. You know, it's kind of like yesterday when we talked about the peppers and the ones that have like the grayish, blackish bottoms, and a lot of companies want to call that some kind of surface discoloration, they want to treat it as a defect. And I said, no, that's just a variety of green pepper, that's all that is. And so some of these zucchinis, the same you know, example, they are a different variety, they're just a lighter skin. I think there's even a Mexican version of zucchini squash. I want to say it's hang on,
Mexican gravy?
calabacita it's a Mexican zucchini is what it is. It's a shorter version and a much lighter skin. It's a light green.
Gray squash, basically.
Gray squash, and we get that.
Yeah, I guess you'd be gray squash.
occasionally.
Yeah.
Couple cases here and there, but.
Yeah, we had a company that was doing a lot of tropical products. They said, well, you know, we want you to cover calabacita. I said, great, I'll cover it. I gotta find out what the hell it is first, but, you know, I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it before, you know, and that's kind of what it is. It's gray squash, that's what we've always called it. You know, it's light green, very pale green, sickly green is what it was.
Yeah, you see it quoted as gray squash pretty much.
Okay, mosaic, this is any type of discoloration, it's about 10% of the surface. Not a whole lot. You know, sometimes, here, I think this, now you tell me, here we've got this, and boy, you see this a lot. So now, do I have discoloration, surface discoloration, scuffing, pitting, sunken discolored areas? I think I've got it all going on there. You know, and you can only score one defect, you know. And so I guess I would just throw that in with all just surface discoloration and be done with it. And allow about 10% of the surface. You know, and here's the problem with allowing so much percent of the surface. What's the retailer or the customer, what percent of the surface are they looking for?
100%,
They want 100% perfect.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing that I've tried to convince that, you know, every retail chain has, they call them something different. They're, you know, field merchandiser, district director, whatever. It's the only, you know, liaison between the distribution center and the grocery store. And I don't know about you, with your grocery stores, if you've gone in and look and talk to a produce manager at a grocery store, some stores have professionals that do this every day and they know what they're doing. Most stores though, the produce manager is whoever showed up on time with Pulse that morning, unfortunately. They were probably working diapers and baby food or the candy aisle yesterday. Now they're the produce manager. And so their expectation, they don't get tolerances, they don't want to get tolerances, they probably don't even want to be in the produce section that day, all right? So their expectation is 0 defects, as is the consumers. And there's no, you know, I'm telling you, these field reps, these district directors and everything, store reps, they have to go out and they have to teach these stores, like, look, you know, you usually have about a 10% leeway on these defects, or tolerance, where some of them are gonna be bad. You know, they find one bad pepper in a box of peppers, they want credits, you know? So, yeah, it never ends as this product gets to the end of its life cycle, you know, at this grocery store for the consumer, when it's at the weakest and its worst, the expectation is the highest. Yeah, and that's why it drives us nuts. Here we have more. I mean, take your pick. Scuffing, probably on the left-hand side, that's scuffed up and started to discolor. The one in the middle is real problematic with those big blotchy water-soaked areas. Those are the ones you want to feel around a little bit, probably decayed. Here's what causes all these marks I talked about, and if you'll note, look real close at the left-hand side, the yellow squash plant actually has little prickers, little thorns on the stems, and it doesn't matter how you reach your hand in there to harvest that product, you're going to rub that squash against one of those stems of that plant, putting it in your basket or your box or whatever that you're loading out in the field. And so that's where the damage is done. You go over and look at zucchinis and the plants are pretty smooth. So they can pick fast and it's not going to scuff them up and scratch them up. All right.
When they're harvesting and packing the same day, those growers don't see it, it doesn't show up.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And I don't think they've ever really talked too much about this, obviously to the growers or whatever, or the harvesters at least. Because these guys are out there, and I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, I'm sure you've seen these guys in action. I mean, they pick fast, you know, and that's how they get paid. The more baskets they dump, the more they get paid that day. And so they're moving real fast, and I don't think they really care if that squash is rubbing up against those prickers or not.
Or any wind, you know, wind section, that's why we see it a lot in yellow squash. Just a lot of these guys don't get to be out on the farms like I do every day, so this is a great conversation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and they get, you talk about the wind. If you're growing anything that is in like a sandy soil, and you get any type of wind,
Yeah.
it sandblasts the product. And so, and that applies to anything that grows out there. It's going to get beaten up by sand. You know, we talked about hail damage yesterday. Well, I mean, that's obvious because that's big and it has some weight to it. Nobody thinks much of wind-driven sand, but it would, I mean, it'll blast the finish off your car. Why wouldn't it affect something that's as delicate as a squash? You know, yeah, and that's really, this problem starts right there. You know, as soon as it's picked, the clock's ticking. And how fast can you get rid of it now?
Now, around here, they use a lot of dry strips to try to, you know, prevent some of the wind, but I've seen a lot of pictures out of Georgia where it's just an 80-acre field of squash, you don't see any of that
Right.
there.
Yeah, and I guess the only plus there is that they do grow most of the stuff down in Georgia. It's a real heavy soil. And so I don't know if they get, I guess they would get a lot of wind-driven dirt and stuff like that in case if they, in a drought situation, you know, everything's gonna blow at that point. I don't think it's that sandy down there, do you?
I don't think so. And it depends, I mean, we got some heavy ground and we got some sandy ground, but overall, we find that a lot of the growers in this area just try to do some rye strips just to help prevent that. you know, it seems like in Mexico, they're all under these hoops and everything else, so they're,
I know most of my career, I was up and down the East Coast, and, you know, they grow a lot of product in Jersey, in South Jersey. And the problem there is that the soil is very loose, it's very sandy. And so if they get any wind coming, you know, across those fields, most every product really gets kind of chewed up, you know, in a storm. And you get this sandblast type effect to it where it starts to pit, and as soon as you make these little dents in the product and pick a product, it's going to start to oxidize and start to discolor, turn tan and brown. Okay, here is you don't see this often. This is essentially a type of internal breakdown. I would describe it as, the best I could describe it as like a pithiness. Normally we see pithy products like celery, stalks of celery. If you break a celery stalk in half and you see the big air gaps that are in, because it's kind of like, it looks like the celery stalk itself is dried out internally. You see it in radishes quite often. I've even seen it in sweet potatoes, where a company will buy, you know, you get close to the holidays, especially, you know, Thanksgiving, and everybody buys sweet potatoes, and sometimes they overbuy. And so they think, oh, that's a really hard potato, it's very hardy, I can put that in the top rack and it'll last, you know, another couple of months. So they'll put it up there, and then they bring it down, and you feel, boy, these boxes feel a lot lighter. And what's happened is that sometimes the sweet potato itself will dry out inside. So you cut it in half, you got all these air pockets inside. It's not a solid potato any longer. It's kind of what has happened here with this yellow squash. It's kind of mushy inside. It's got a lot of air pockets. Essentially what this is doing is starting to break down internally. And I guess another way to look at it would be it's kind of like rotten from the inside out. This is something the USDA won't touch. It's not a defect. But try to explain that to any consumer or any grocery store chain. Because they look at it and they go the exact polar opposite way, and they'll score it against the decay tolerance, your 1% tolerance. You know, and I say, hey, you just wipe that off. Yeah. The Kroger guy says, well, we're not in the business of wiping mold off, so it better not have any mold on it. I said, now you realize this can happen in your cooler. You know, if there's enough moisture, enough humidity, yeah, you could grow mold on the bottom of the squash. You could do it. It wouldn't necessarily, you can't blame the shipper for that one, you know. When you see this has got to be wiped off, and you got to put some pressure on the bottom of that, the blossom end of that product, to see if the mold has actually started to eat into the squash itself. Okay, and then last but not least, you know, the mess. And it can get pretty bad pretty fast if you keep them too long. Okay? Now, lastly, with zucchini especially, all right, you see this gunk every now and then. And normally where you're going to see it, if there's a scrape in the side of it, it can even come out the sides. But normally you're going to see it right up here. All right? And this is what I was talking about yesterday, zucchini snot. I don't know what the hell to call it, it's other than that, you know. And
Oozing.
oozing, what do you call it?
You call it
We
oozing.
call it oozing.
Oozing, okay. That sounds better than zucchini snot. So I'm gonna go with oozing, I'm gonna use your term from now on, that's it, I promise, okay? So we got this oozing going on here, all right? And I know a lot of inspectors want to call this decay. I said, no, it's not decay, you know? Now, what you have to do with the oozing is, of course, you have to wipe it off to see if there is any decay under it, then we can call it decay. But if there's not, that's not even a defect.
it's healing itself.
Exactly, and that's all it's doing, is the product healing itself from being cut. It's the same thing as you and I, we cut ourselves and it scabs over. All right, fortunately, I guess, we don't ooze too much. I guess you get a nice, you fall off your motorcycle, you get a nice road rash. Yeah, I think you'll ooze then a little bit, but you're not gonna get anything like this gummy substance. You know, now the bad thing here is sometimes they can really ooze a lot.
It
All right.
will turn into decay eventually.
Well, I would think if anything, initially what'll happen is a lot of times you get the thing oozing right down the side of the zucchini. We saw it yesterday afternoon when we talked about the mangoes, because mangoes and papayas will do the same thing. they'll ooze out of that stem, and mangoes are even worse, because you'll have 2 or 3 lines of it going down the mango.
But that's like a sap though.
Yeah, but I think it's the same thing where they're cut, when that thing gets cut off at the stem, and that's where it originates, it oozes down the side, and the bad thing is, it picks up dirt. And it's ugly at that point. You know, it almost looks like as bad as the surface discoloration. Same thing can happen here. It can pick up dirt and dust, or it could just materially detract. That would be the other thing, if you think that's too much. That in and of itself, now that's not too much oozing. You guys have seen this. Plus, I mean, if you've got your own name for it, you've obviously seen it enough, okay?
We had the name a long time ago.
And how did you treat it? Did you ignore it? Did you report it?
We report it, and then as we ship it out, we just wipe it off. Or cut the stems, when it goes on the stem, we just cut it off, and it looks fresh, brand new again.
Yeah, and the thing is, the USDA won't, it's not a defect, unless there's a defect under it. Decay.
We see this oozing quite a bit at different parts of the year. And if you sit around very long with that product, it does turn into defect.
It will, if it sits too long,
Like if we see it on a Monday, we go back and look at the same product on a Wednesday, it's starting to break down.
really.
That's a guaranteed fact.
I've never known it break down that fast.
Next time you got a zucchini and you see some oozing, just hold it, watch it a few days. It starts to penetrate into the squash, and then it just goes really fast.
Well, that's what I told the class yesterday, is that, you know, one of the big chains in Toledo area, the last 8 or 9 months, they've changed the way they buy produce. They buy a lot of seconds. But unfortunately, unlike you guys, they're not set up to handle seconds. They don't rework it. They just put it out on the shelf. So I've countered that. I just go over with my camera and my phone. I just take defect pictures in the store, you know, which drives my wife out of her mind, because she won't even, she disappears. She says, you know, when they throw you out of here, I don't even know you, pal, you know. And so, but this is just it. So I'm sure I'm gonna be able to go over there and find this, because that's the kind of stuff that I'm dealing with at the good old Meyer across the road from us right now.
And unfortunately, I mean, we've dealt with, everybody in here has dealt with this on zucchini. Hey, we got some oozing, I know, but there's nothing we can do about it, send it out. That, just like Cherry Lakes, one of our Minnesota growers this year, there's something wrong with in the field, that maybe the product would come in, a little bit of oozing, okay, let's try to get it out as fast as we can. 2 or 3 days later, those oozers, they're breaking down already.
Really.
Nobody's saying anything. You guys all have experienced it, right?
Absolutely,
You've seen it turn to decay.
yes.
Really? Okay. I'm gonna have to, well, let me preface this first off, you know, and I'm sure you guys have all heard this, you maybe have even said it before, you know, is you look at something today, and it doesn't look that great. And you hear, or you even say, you know what that's gonna look like in 2 days? Or you know what it's gonna look like in 24 hours? You know, and I got a pretty good idea what it might look like in 24 hours, but when you're doing an inspection, you can only make an assessment and report on what you see right now. And that's why God made re-inspections. You know, I can't, if I was that good, the heck with this, I'd forecast me some lotto numbers from Powerball numbers, and I'd write you from my island. You know, that, it's not gonna happen. You know, so I'm gonna get some of this, I wanna see how fast it breaks down, because you know, I've been told, I've never really seen it break down. I've seen it oozing, and then I've also seen decay on the blossom end. You know, whether one had anything to do with the other, you know, I scored the decay, I didn't score that. I wanna see how fast it breaks down though.
Definitely on the side, when you see that oozing, it'll sit there and it'll, like it's healing itself.
Right.
For a day or two, that it starts breaking into the body.
Okay, I would agree 100% that if you see the oozing coming out a cut on the side, it's gonna break down a lot faster than if it's oozing from the stem scar. Because if you think about, well, if you just think about look at how thin that skin is on there and how soft the zucchini is. And then you sit there and, I mean, I could press as hard as I possibly can on that stem and it's going nowhere. So you've got a lot more hardier area of the product up here than you got on the side. So yeah, I would bet if it's oozing from the side, it's gonna probably get nice and fluffy and gray. It's gonna get like that before long.
Boy, I wish we had an inspector here in Iowa. I mean, all these things that are QAs are catching it when stuff's receiving. We got to call the shipper and say, here's what's going on. Most of the shippers we deal with know now that, all right, an inspector's gonna cost $700-800 to come up here to us, out of Kansas City or Chicago. They'll fly out of Chicago. Kansas City, they were shorthanded quite a bit here a few years ago, so definitely out of Chicago. But it's expensive. Where if we're like Chicago, where it's $70 per inspection, instead of letting our guys sweat it, just, okay, we're gonna call and give an inspection on it. You know right where you're at, you pass or fail. We don't have to second guess ourselves. Or 2 days later, if it passes, we want to call re-inspection. We've got such a disadvantage here.
You're absolutely, there's no question, but even in the larger cities, they're not replacing inspectors. There was 4 in Atlanta, there's 1. There were 3 in Cleveland, there's 1. There were 3 in Cincy, there's 1. The guy in Indianapolis, there's 1 there now, there's always been 1, but now the USDA, even though they have a training center in Fredericksburg, this guy goes around training, and so that leaves Indianapolis, where there's 4 major warehouses that want service without an inspector. They either come from Chicago or Cincinnati.
Why? I mean, produce companies are paying for the inspection, so is there even with those fees, not enough funding for more USDA inspectors?
I left USDA, I retired in 11 and Tom retired the year after that. And I left the inspection service in 07. And he left a year after I did and finished his career with the FAA. And you can see the handwriting on the wall at that point. Right now, the inspection service does more GAP and GIP food safety audits than they do inspections. And you talk about losing your focus and losing grips on your mission. There it is. As they've closed several offices. El Paso closed, Salt Lake closed, Buffalo closed, Louisville closed. The guy in Cincinnati covers a territory from Louisville to Columbus to Cincinnati and over to Indianapolis when that guy's not there. It's impossible to do that. If you're not in a city that has a large office like New York or Philly or Dallas or LA, someplace like that, good luck. Your inspection is going to cost, and I think you're being kind. I heard the other day that some of your inspections cost about $1,500. $1,500 for a federal inspection. You know, when Tom and I started, we would go out to do an inspection, and inspections were so cheap, there were $42 for an inspection. So you'd go in to do an inspection on, go in to do the tomato inspection and say, oh, while you're here, look at the squash, the lemons, the limes, the lettuce, and the potatoes, please. So you do 5 or 6, and that's just the way it went. And now it just doesn't happen anymore, and they're not replacing these guys. You can't get service, The example I had yesterday, I went into, on a Monday or Tuesday to do a class in Indianapolis. They had called for an inspection on strawberries, probably one of the weakest commodity that we deal with, delicate. They called it in Thursday afternoon. They still hadn't seen an inspector. I said, well, what's the point now? Why cancel it? Who needs it? And so.
It's expired.
Yeah, well, the good news is it's kind of turned this part-time retirement job that Tom and I wanted into a full-time, training inspectors how to do federal type inspections. And it's kind of worked its way back down in the system because now we're starting to do them for Shipping Point, your vendors as well. And I think the ultimate goal is the hell with the inspection service and the PACA. We'll work it out amongst ourselves and we'll avoid that cost. Because somebody's getting stuck with a bill. The inspection service is a user fee funded operation. So they're going to charge you a fee, and unfortunately for you guys, the fee isn't so much the inspection itself. That's still, I think, pretty reasonable, $100 or so. It's everything that goes along with it for them to get here. And then how long does it take them to get here? If you called for an inspection today, which we got Thursday, would you see one?
If we called right now, no, it wouldn't be till tomorrow if they're available.
And then they gotta fly on one day's notice, right?
Right now, they're able to come out of Kansas City, but you're still talking a 2.5 hour drive, 3 hour drive, depending on where we're at in Kansas City.
So they will drive from Kansas City?
Yes.
They won't
Chicago,
fly?
They fly.
Jeez.
I think the state of Iowa, even for health inspectors for restaurants and things, I think they have 3 for the state.
Every state at one point had a state inspection program. And they had at least 1 or 2 inspectors that were licensed and trained by the USDA Inspection Service, and they called them collaborators. They were licensed to do federal inspections on federal certificates, but the state billed you, they paid USDA overhead for supervision and training and things like that, but everybody, they had the same authority as a federal inspector had. Every state had one. And so when USDA, the money started getting tight, and it's pretty easy to tell you why the money got tight, because the staff in Washington that doesn't earn any revenue and makes the most salary, they have to be paid somehow too out of that same pot that the inspectors are charging fees for. Okay, so the fees keep going up, and what's happening is that a lot of the vendors and even the receivers are saying, wow, this inspection has gone from charging $100, $150 for an inspection to $1,000 for an inspection. And somebody's got to pay this. How about if we just worked it out and we won't have to worry about that? And if you think about it, who gets stuck with the bill 90% of the time? It's not you guys,
It's a grower.
it's the grower. And so at some point, they're gonna have to wise up. And, and I guess the other thing, you can't look, if you're a QA inspector, you can't look at someone calling for a federal inspection on your result. I would never take it personal. There's a lot of reasons to call for an inspection, and a lot of it is because, I don't think it happens so much here because you guys don't reject anything, do you?
No.
It's gotta be almost running out of the box before you'd reject it?
Yeah, it's got.
Or you'd even take that?
Contaminated trash, I mean, like blood on the floor.
Okay, if it's a contaminated, you'll reject that, but as far as product being discolored, bruised, decayed, you'll take it, you guys will work it, and you'll run with it, right? Okay, well, then, you're not even gonna get that many rejections, but a lot of times when product is rejected, this is something that can't go back to the manufacturer, it's too far, so they gotta find another home for it. So what the grower is using that inspection report for is an unbiased report of the quality and the condition of that, so they can take that product out and market it somewhere else. And now it's getting to the point where even the grower is saying, my God, if I'm taking this stuff into Des Moines, Iowa, and I don't have an inspector that's anywhere within, 200 miles? How far is Kansas City from here?
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours, so it's roughly 200, 225 miles away. And you know what they're charging, and if they drive, I think it'd be cheaper if you had them fly. Would they charge you for mileage? I think it's $1.65 a mile, round trip. So if you figure 450 miles times $1.65, you got a calculator, and that's part of that bill right there, the mileage. I wish I could do that. I would stop all of this and I'd just drive around. For $1.65 a mile? Oh, ka-ching. Yeah, and that's the lion's share of the bill. So there's got to be an answer somewhere, and I don't think the inspection service, the way I understand it, and one of my good friends is still an inspector in Chicago. And I saw him when I did a class in Champaign, Illinois. He came all the way down from Chicago to do one inspection at this facility. And he said he had talked with the guy that's actually in charge of the program, the director of the program right now, who we both have known forever. And the last conversation he had, he says, I don't know that I can save this time. We are that much in a money problem right now. And it doesn't look like Congress is gonna bail them out because Congress doesn't have the money. So, I don't know what that means. Does that mean no more inspection program? And you guys gotta work it out with your shippers? I don't know what it means. It doesn't sound very good, I know that. You know, of course, the situation you guys are in right now isn't very good. Okay, I'm done preaching, that's it. But, yeah, I feel bad for your situation, and anybody that's in a rough location, like, one of Kroger's facilities, and they're one of their affiliates, is in Utah. And the feds closed their Salt Lake office, made the guy retire, forced him out. They didn't have to close, they forced him out. Okay, and because the state of Utah had a program. In the following year, the state of Utah said, you know what? We're getting burned on this deal, we're losing money, we're closing it down. So they closed their program down. Now there's no inspector in the state of Utah. And we had here, the example was, they had 6 pallets of strawberries in the warehouse, and the shipper insisted on an inspection. Insisted on it. So they flew the guy in from LA. And by the time he was done inspecting 6 pallets, it was $2,000 for an inspection. Now, you can't tell me that even if his inspection had reversed what the Kroger inspector had found, which it didn't, by the way, so the shipper got stuck with the bill and the rejection and probably less for those strawberries. Even if it had reversed it, would it have been cost effective on 6 pallets? I'm doubting it.
I'm guessing the shipper was confident in saying, no, Kroger's sticking it up my ass again. And he's trying to prove a point that it backfired on him. That, where is that gonna add any value to the relationship ever getting an order again?
Well, yeah, exactly. And you know, the other thing is, you know, I looked at the guy when he told me the story, and I just had to laugh. And I said, you know, I see a silver lining in this cloud for you as an inspector for Kroger. He says, oh yeah. He says, everybody takes my word on everything I do now. Nobody calls for another federal inspection because they don't want to get stuck with that huge bill, because they're going to have to fly someone in from parts unknown, LA or, you know, San Francisco or wherever the hell they're flying them in from. You know, no way to run a business, and I don't know what USDA's thinking, but I hope they keep thinking it, because it keeps Tom and I, at least for 5 more years until I really want to retire. So it keeps us in business, you know. And I think by then, there's going to be such a good rapport between vendors and receivers that they're not going to need the USDA or the PACA intervention anymore. They're going to work it out amongst themselves and just send reports and pictures back and forth, and that it's going to be it. Because nobody's going to want to risk the cost of the inspection. So
Yeah, technology these days sure does make it.
it's helped you guys a lot, you know. And don't get me wrong, there's an easy way, you know. There's always a loophole, and there's always a way around something. You know, I can make a most beautiful box of produce look like hell with one picture. I'll just take 7 decayed lemons out of 7 different boxes, and I'll pile them all on the top of this box and take a picture. Mix them in a little bit just so they can see them all. Take a picture and say, look at this crap you just sent me. Yeah. Yeah, a picture will say 1,000 words, but it can say the wrong words too. You know, if you're, and that's not to say that we have anybody that's unscrupulous in this business. No.
Okay, great. You guys haven't heard about this. That's why I was a little late this morning. I walked in. We sent 800 pepper down to Hy-Vee last night. 200 from Daniels, 600 from Vernon County. Hy-Vee flagged them. They took 3 pictures with 2 peppers in one box with DK, another one with a bruised shoulder that's starting to brown. So, great example. Oh, occasional. And Eric said, Span, that he went out there with you guys to go through them. You didn't see shit in them yesterday.
Nope.
That, you know what? We gotta hold their hand. If you ever call an inspection on Hy-Vee with your product owner, you're not gonna do business again.
Well, and that's kind of what I've seen. It used to be the shippers had the upper hand over the receivers. And it's done a complete flip-flop now. And the receivers, especially the bigger they are, the more clout they have. Yeah, you can go through the PACA, and yeah, I understand good delivery, and you can make me take it, but you'll make me take it once, because I ain't buying another thing from you. And if you sell 1,000 loads to that company a year, and you've you've won the battle on 1 load, and you've just lost the war on the other 999, and how much money is that worth? So the vendor, the shipper, pretty much has gotten to the point that they're getting real used to taking a big bite. And that's just the way it's gonna be. Remember we said yesterday, where's a 900-pound gorilla sit? Anywhere it wants. And that's exactly the way they're playing the game now. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, just as at least before the shippers were playing the game by the rules that the PACA set. The rules of the game. Hey, there's good delivery. Yeah, sometimes it won't make grade, but it meets PACA good delivery. You still have to take it because this is a perishable product, and that's what everybody signed on for when you paid your license fee. And you understand the rules going in. Those are the rules, baby. Play by them. And most big companies now ignore the PACA rules. They say, well, yeah, you'll make me take it, and by law I have to take it, and I will take it. But it'll be the last one I take. And so now, what do? So much for the PACA is what I'd say if I'm the shipper.
It's just like Walmart, they get backed up on balance, a load will show up there, oh, we're rejecting this one for quality, and there's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with
Click
it.
the load.
Yes, I've seen that happen way too many times. Because they overbought, and now they're long, and there's 0 defects, but we're rejecting it. And you say, well, wait a minute, and I've heard the shippers moan and groan. Well, wait a minute, you have to take it. Oh, do we have to take it? You're right, we do have to take this one. I'll see you later. We'll take this one and we'll see you.
I would
Yeah.
imagine that type of business attitude, though, over time, when they are, like the big heavy-handed Walmarts of the world that, start blocking out certain, suppliers and vendors, just carte blanche, you're done. At some point, they're gonna need product from somebody, and they're gonna call us, or whoever, and they're gonna say, hey, guess what, I need this, this, and this, and what if that supplier says, I'm done with you too?
Yeah, and at some point, you can only go so far because there's only so many shippers
Right.
and growers. Okay, and I'll tell you right now, the berry industry has already got their act together because I got a call last year, and one of the chains that we trained he says, look, I know you can't tell me what all the other companies' specs are. I said, that's right, I can't. And he says, but can you at least tell me, are they having to buy all their berries on good delivery, or are they still working off their own specs? And I said, no, some of them are still buying on their own specs. Well, their supplier was saying, hey, we don't care what the US standards are for berries. It's PACA, good delivery, and that's what you're gonna have to accept. And I swear, not 5 hours later, I got a call from a much bigger chain that said, hey, all those berry classes that you do for us, and we're coming up for our refresher classes this year, you gotta change all our specs on them to good delivery. And I said, no kidding. And it's, that told me one thing. The berry industry got their act together enough, and they colluded and said, we're going to stand united, and this is what we're going to make the industry take. And so right now, the only commodity that I know consistently is marketed under PACA good delivery tolerances are berries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries. That's it. Sometimes lettuce, iceberg lettuce, California, they make them take it on that on good delivery as well. Everything else, no, it's whatever the market will bear. It's because all of the growers can't get their act together. They'll say, okay, we're all going to stand together, and then you'll have one over here that says, we'll let them slide this time. We'll let them get away with it. Well, once they open the door, that gives them the power to the receiver, the Walmarts of the world. Yeah, and you guys are kind of stuck right in the middle, because you got to put up with the vendors, the shippers, although I don't think, you guys aren't getting that much stuff shipped in directly though, are you? Or do you take more rejects from other companies, or do you get more stuff shipped in direct?
Correct.
You do get more direct, okay. Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, I guess you can play that game to a little bit, but then again, I'm gonna guess that Capital City doesn't have the clout of a Walmart or a Kroger or somebody, or an Aldi or somebody like that,
Not yet.
Yeah. If people look at Aldi's and, there's another German company that's got their foot in the door now too. Lidl, LIDL, it's even a bigger company than Aldi. They're three big German grocery chains, and now we've got two of them here. And just FYI, Aldi is the fourth largest privately held company on the planet. Cargill, Cook Industries, Lidl, which is number 3, and Aldi. They're worth billions and billions of dollars, and they're privately held. So they don't have to answer to any stockholders. You can do any damn thing they want, you know? Yeah, and they're gonna come in here and start gobbling up, you know? So, anyway. Okay, what do we call this again? Goop? What do we call it? Ooze, okay, ooze, not goop. I have to put that in there, okay. So, any questions on the soft squash? And again, this is the one you're most likely gonna have the biggest problem with. Not so much this stuff. This stuff is pretty hardy, you know. This stuff had last, I know it lasted on my kitchen counter for months, acorn squash and spaghetti squash. These are a little bit older standards, a couple grades that you deal with, a 1 and a 2. Pumpkins is thrown in with winter squash. It's the same standard that's used. They're just treated a little bit differently. There's a few more rules as we get to the end that apply to pumpkins that don't apply to the rest of the hard squash. Now this is one where I'm gonna bet for the most part when you guys get hard squash and winter squash that you guys are counting each one, and that's how you're figuring your defects. And you know, these tolerances, these standards are either set up by weight or by count. And this is one that does a little bit of both. If you think about especially things like butternut squash and things like that, they can come in some really oddball sizes in one carton. You know, big ones and little ones. And that's why when you get that much difference in size of the product in the carton, you're supposed to do it by weight. You know, because the little one is going to be a lot less proportionally to that carton that's defective than the big ones. I still don't know anybody that's doing it that way. It's much easier to do these by count. And the acorn squashes, I'm going to say even the spaghetti squashes should be pretty uniform in size, I would think, that you could get away with it. Some of the other ones are, you know, it's kind of like the cabbage we looked at the other day out there that was in the bags. Some of the heads were this big and some of the heads were this big. That's another one that's a weight, as you'll see as we get into that this afternoon, that's a weight issue, a weight-based standard. And I don't know, I still think it's easier to do things by count. So I would stick with that, just know that that's an option with this one. If the feds come in and do a federal inspection on any type of hard squash, they're gonna look to see if you've got more than a 25% weight difference between the biggest and the largest in the lot. And if there is that difference, they're gonna do this on a weight basis. They'll weigh everything, okay? This is one that they've cut out the serious damage tolerance. So you've got a 10% total defects, and then you've got the soft rot, wet bake down, or what they call serious damage by dry rot. All right, and that's all under the 2%. Normal dry rot would be like fusarium rot. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. It's a real slow-moving, slow-growing type of decay. You'll see it a lot when we talk about potatoes this afternoon. Dry rot and winter squash, if it's just damage, it goes against the 10. If it's serious damage, it goes against the decay tolerance. Okay, that's not such a big deal. The big deal here is they can't be broken or cracked. And because these things, sometimes they're handled real rough, and I've seen spaghetti squash and butternuts and pumpkins, all of them with big fresh cracks in them, all right? Those would all be scored as defects, can't have any soft rot or wet breakdown, and the color and the shape, the colors are really a big deal with acorn squash. And what we're looking at is something that's turning yellow to orange because of age, not because it was sitting on the ground. All right, acorn squash will usually have a ground spot. Just like when we looked at the watermelons yesterday, it's going to be a yellow to orange color. What we're looking at when we're looking at discoloration of acorn squash is this like almost like uniform haze of like a light yellow to an orange color over the surface of the squash that's on the opposite side of the fruit from the ground spot. Sort of like that. And you see, here we have the ground spot in this picture, but look at this one. If you look real close at that green of that acorn squash, there's yellow coming through it, and it's over the entire surface. It's just an old squash is all it is.
We saw some old acorn last year that Keith had in here, it looked like pumpkins almost. Remember that, guys?
It almost completely turned yellow to orange.
Orange, like, these need to go to the cows.
Yeah, and when you brought those in and you cut them, what did they, was there any breakdown inside of them yet? Or was it still pretty solid flesh?
I don't really know, I just remember seeing them like, okay, these things need to go. I don't remember which Midwest grower is from, but it was late in the season, I was like,
Yeah, I mean, we
knew they were old.
eat these quite a bit at our house, and you know, we bake them, and you know, I've had them in there that they've sat on the counter for 3 weeks or whatever, and they've turned like a nice yellow to orange, and I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go, we've probably let these go too far, and you cut them, and you know, cut them open to clean them out, to put them in the oven, and they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just not green anymore, you know, and this is something when they go out to market this at you know, at the retail level, people are expecting this dark green acorn squash, and any yellowing in it is something that they don't want. In fact, most don't even want that ground spot either. They think that's a defect. You know, and I don't know how you get around it. It's a heavy item, it's gonna sit on the ground. There's no way to get around it, you know? It's like say, hey, Paul, we kinda like you, but we don't like that one, your left leg, you know?
Oh,
Yeah,
just
leave
like,
that at home.
yellow bellies on your cucumbers, well, they're not freaking Mexican whole cubes.
Exactly. Absolutely, yeah. Or watermelons without a ground, you know, why can't it be completely green? Well, you know, it sits on the ground, that's why it can't be completely green. It doesn't color up, you know. So yeah, you're looking at this pale color. Here's a calabaza squash. This is another one that very popular with the Hispanic community. It's almost a cross between an acorn squash and a pumpkin. That's the best way I can describe it. I've never eaten this. I don't know if you guys ever carry these. These they're almost like a small version of a pumpkin, and they kind of got this like flattened. They're more of like a flat squash than they are a tall round squash. They say they make great soup. I don't know. I've never had it.
We did carry them. Fairway had the store because the Asians like them.
The calabazas?
They use them for a soup.
Yep. It's supposed to be great soup. Dirt can be a problem, and it's not so much with, I think, the other hard squash as much as it is with pumpkins. All right, and if it detracts from the appearance, score it as a defect. Scarring, same way. They can be all scarred up, rough handling. Scars are, for the most part, a lot of times scars are caused by insects. Insects that feed on the outer rind or the outer portion skin of the product, and then it scars over as the product grows. I would say those pumpkins on the lower left there, yeah, those are scars, but it looks like someone got out in the field, something got a little hungry.
Birds.
You know, birds, rats, something, you know, I like birds better. I'm gonna use birds, because rats that's disgusting, but yeah, we'll use birds. Yeah, I'm prepared to believe you today. Yeah, and yeah, they can get pretty scarred up, and this would be a quality type defect. These aren't gonna get any worse. Hopefully you wouldn't see them at all, but anyway. Yeah, if they're not well healed, you're gonna score them as damage, or when they're more than 10% of the surface. And you'll notice that, yeah, there's these serious damage parameters. And for those of you that weren't in here yesterday, you say, wait a minute, I thought you just said a minute ago there was no serious damage tolerance. There isn't a serious damage tolerance. Whenever you see a definition for serious damage and there's no serious damage tolerance, you know there's a US number 2 grade. And there is for winter squash. Because it has to be that bad to score it against a choice. You just gotta allow a lot more defect to score it against the US number 2 grade. Okay? Yeah, the problem here with cuts and mechanical damages is like the same what we talked about, the cuts on the side of the zucchini. You know, the zucchini will ooze that gunk out of it and will eventually turn to decay. you see a lot of surface mold at least when you see these cuts, in winter squash. And at this point, yeah, you're gonna have to run the risk of taking your thumb and pressing down on that area a little bit to see if that is still solid underneath it. If it's just surface mold, or has it now affected the squash and rotted right through the skin. We have our stem scars, scabby, this is, looks like a scabby pumpkin. It's a field-borne disease, just like scab in potatoes or any of the other items that we looked at yesterday that were affected by scab. Boy, this is a big one, especially with spaghetti squash. And yeah, I guess butternut to a point, but it seems like spaghettis tend to get this, this brown tannish surface discoloration as they get older. Pretty ugly stuff. And I would score that if it detracts. This would score against both grades, against the 10% tolerance if you've got a fresh cut. Remember, any type of opening into the product is an entryway for bacteria, it's an entryway for bugs, it's an exit for moisture, which causes the thing to shrivel and decline. Now, insect damage, I mean, I don't know. This stuff is pretty hardy and the skins are pretty hard on it. Very hard for a worm to penetrate anything except if you've got a stem scar. That would probably be the weakest link on a hard squash if they would penetrate into this stem scar. So here we have dry rot. And this is a type of decay, and most dry rots are fusarium type rots. They grow real slow. And now it's a judgment call. Is it bad enough if it detracts from the appearance, it goes against the 10% tolerance. And if it seriously detracts, it goes against the rot tolerance, the 2%. And so I would say the one on the left would go against the 10%, the one on the right would easily go against the decay tolerance, because it's the one side of it's completely dry rotted. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you, I've seen this, and I never knew what to call it, and I just called it surface discoloration, and usually it was, gray to black raised surface discoloration, and that's what I would call it, and be done with it. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Edema, odema, oedema, it's a mystery to me, Yeah, I probably couldn't have got that spelled right on a certificate, so I would have never scored it anyway. So I'd call it something else. They say it's moisture stress. I'm thinking what? Not enough moisture would cause that, or too much moisture would cause it.
I would guess that was moisture.
Yeah. And I got that from Cal Davis. By the way, if you've ever logged on to the UCal Davis's website to look at fruit and vegetables, it's the holy grail, I'm telling you. USDA, when they put together all of their inspection manuals and defect scoring guides and things like that, that's their source, is UCal Davis. This reared its head a couple times yesterday. Remember we talked about watermelons, we saw it on avocados. It can even affect like tomatoes. Anthracnose. It starts out as these lesions that are pretty solid. They just don't stay solid very long, and they turn to rot. And then you got soft rot. You guys handle a pretty good volume of pumpkins?
No.
None, or very little?
Very little. There's no margin in it.
It seems that when the grocery store chains start buying bins of pumpkins consistently, year after year after year, you'd think they'd get this sooner or later. They way overbuy. And now we have these bins of pumpkins that they just don't know what the hell to do with, so they sit in the warehouse. And they just sit in the warehouse and rot, is what they do, because they never go anywhere except to the dump. And I think, but there's got to be a way, there's got to be something you could do with all of these pumpkins that you overbuy. Or maybe, how about next year, don't buy as many and run the risk of running out, Pick a spot and set your line and draw your line in the sand and buy it, and then don't buy any more after that, because they throw out a lot of pumpkins every year. A lot of them go bad. You see a lot of rot.
I don't know, in this region, pumpkins, the market's not worth anything hardly. I don't know about other regions, but what have you heard?
Oh, I don't know, it seems like grocery store chains feel they have to have them as an attraction, you know, Halloween time and Thanksgiving time, boy, you gotta have bins of pumpkins because people are gonna come here and buy their pumpkins. I mean, everybody I ever know with a little kid wants to go out to a pumpkin patch or a pumpkin farm to actually get their pumpkin, they're not gonna go to the grocery store, you
Well, they're
know.
not gonna eat it, you know.
Well, and you know, and I haven't carved a pumpkin in I don't know how long, just, you know, I guess that when I finally do retire and I'm actually around my grandkids and, or, you know, we're closer to one another, I probably will, you know, but right now I use a plastic lighted pumpkin or a ceramic lighted pumpkin, that's about as far as I go, you know. So here with the soft rod, again, it's a free from defect, except, remember I told you pumpkins are a little bit different when it affects the stem only, okay? Decay affecting the stem is not a defect except for pumpkins. So if you've got a stem on an acorn squash and it's decayed, yeah, it's decayed, so what? As long as it hasn't made its way down into the squash. Same with all the other hard squash, except for a pumpkin. And then the decay isn't scored against the decay tolerance. If it affects the stem, it's scored against the defect tolerance. And I'm pretty sure that the only reason, the only justification for this is because of jack-o'-lanterns at Halloween. You have to have something, gotta have something to grab and pull off to light the candle. It's my only thought on that. Yeah, and yeah, most companies don't want anything to do with decay. Any questions on any of the squash? Most of this, as I said, we've looked at most of this stuff so far. The only other thing that I would want to do is, you know, when you start getting some kind of discoloration like this, you know, surface discoloration, you want to cut a couple back just to make sure that there's none of the discoloration has affected, you know, the inside of the pumpkin itself. Now, here's one where it doesn't look too bad, but I'll just pass that around and let you guys be the judge of that. Feel the top part of that stem. That's all you have to feel.
Oozy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not oozing, that's just rotten. Yeah, I mean, you look at this, and this is one of those things, if you're gonna do any type of internal analysis on summer squash or eggplant, this is one, and it's even more of an issue with eggplant. When you cut that eggplant and you look at it, you gotta make your decision like right now. Have you ever cut an eggplant open? And you look at it and say, well, I don't know if that looks bad or not, I'm gonna sit that down, I'm gonna go finish looking at this box of eggplant. Now you come back and look at it, what's it look like?
Black.
It's black, yeah. It
It
oxidizes
turns, yeah.
faster than any product I think we look at, it'll turn color on you, and bad news, okay? Yeah, that one is pretty rotten. The rest of them are just, you've got some obvious discoloration issues and some surface issues with the yellow squash back there. And that's, I don't know how you're gonna get around it. Questions on squash? Okay, we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll start on the citrus.